question, or if either of you want to piggyback on what the other person said, it's feel free to do so. So, yeah. Maybe the quick question now is, what does that mean to, in terms of decision making, in terms of like, and we're talking about the impacts, cumulative impacts, the environmental, social, climate change impacts that Native Americans might be experiencing, and then given what we heard earlier, and then also this whole idea of I heard this morning that a lot of the information is oral, passed down oral, and how do you even kind of like record and capture and know about that, so.
Right. Well, remember there was a movie, I can't remember a long time ago, but these guys had a task of collecting everything that was most important to civilization and store it someplace, because I think it was a big old creator was coming to destroy the earth or do something to the earth.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think about here is to your point about elders and traditional knowledge. Well, the elders hold that knowledge that you're asking there, the data. And so I think, how do you build something with the elders and in terms of their knowledge? And then I think, and how do you, and you look at this technology, one of the things that we do to do that. So in my work, I get to travel a lot. And so I was in the Pacific Northwest, and I was doing some work on a drought and working with tribes, and we met this tribe that was on the coast. And one of the big things, so I was part of the Department of Interior's Elevating TK and Federal Decision Making Handbook. And that came
What's the name again? Elevating
Department of Interior's Elevating Traditional Knowledge.
Elevating Traditional Knowledge.
So that's a handbook that myself and other tribal, they call them SMEs, subject matter experts, are part of. And so when I was out there with that tribe, the Sakomi, I asked them, how are you guys documenting your traditional knowledge? And that's a big deal, right?
Yeah,
part of the handbook, and this administration or the previous one had these executive orders directing agencies work with traditional knowledge. So while we started with plants, we started with something that we knew, right? So the flora and the fauna, and how we began to do that was that we brought our elders in, and we began to describe these plants, their uses, and their language, and their words, and all that, and we began to document that, right? And pretty soon we got to the point where we could then put them in a database. They've been doing that for 20 years, because I never heard about it, but that's part of the challenge. I think is that it's because it's their knowledge, they're going to share it with what they have. So I think that there are opportunities to further develop that handbook that we did at DOI, because that got reviewed by all the officer, all the solicitor general types, right? Scientist guys that looked at this, I don't know if that's good or not, but they all looked at it and they all came up with something. And I think that could be expanded to other agencies and such, because I think that's been vetted by some pretty good tribal leadership on that. That's been used through consultation with tribal nations. So they got to look at that draft and provide input. And so I think looking at existing things like that are really important. How do you build upon that? Because that was a lot of work to do that. That's a lot of money. How do you build them, especially when in this kind of environment? So I think also about language, right? So the languages. So what if national academies brought forth a strategy to elevate traditional languages in America, for instance? It's like a Marshall Plan. I think we need a Marshall Plan for traditional knowledge and traditional data, just because of the fragility of our elders and the state of our elders in terms of their health, and sort of what's happening, because we heard that again today, and I heard it today. So things like that, I think, are opportunities.
Go ahead, do you have any?
It's interesting you mention all that, just because it's like all Polynesian cultures as well, like a lot of knowledge is preserved through the elders because
Mhm.
we have it. And it's often just passed down with like word of mouth, storytelling, things like that.
Yeah.
But then I think a lot of the knowledge actually is like within our halals or Polynesian dance schools. And the Kumu, who's a teacher, who's practically a professor just because the amount of training they have to go through.
Yeah.
They're the ones who sort of like guide the halal. But within the halal, there's a lot taught. There's the hula performances and dances. But then there's also, the various plants that are used in, making way, for example, which are the means, why they're all important.
Yeah.
There's the knowledge about, the melee we perform, the chants, the songs, what their words mean, the language that's involved in them, learning that language throughout. Like all of that is preserved in those halals, right? And that's how it's passed down generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, thinking about that as a decision-making tool, I think, the mentorship program that I run, I actually base a lot of it on what not to do based on examples that I've seen. And I think a lot of the mentorship programs out there take this approach of like, you're coming into the classroom and you're being a professional to the student. You're maintaining that like very large distance, that boundary. And I think that mentors need boundaries. I think that's necessary. But I think that it's to the point where the student feels like they are a student and not a member of the community. And so I think that, when you're thinking about decision-making tools, I think there's this sense of, you can, like a Kumu maintains a certain boundary with their Hmong other students as well. But I think the biggest thing is that, when you're a part of that community, when you're integrated into it, you're seen as a member of that community. Even if there's a boundary, it's not so much so to the point where you don't trust that person who's relaying knowledge and information. And so I think getting to the point of this, I think, an opportunity to improve that is by, having people go out and actually integrate these communities, get to know them, so they develop a respect and rapport with them, and then going from there and saying, how can we help? What can we do? Things like that. Just really becoming a part of that community. I think the other point that you brought up was technology, and our counterpart who was here before, she mentioned how she is working very hard to, help elders get more acquainted and familiar and comfortable with technology and the use of it. And I think she was thinking of it more in the context of, how can we, teach these folks how to spot misinformation, how to navigate the web and everything. Maybe there's even something in there in the sense of, you're talking about sort of storing plant knowledge and information. Maybe it's the same thing here where as we're training the elders on how to use IT and how to use, technology, maybe we can teach them through the lens of, you're working to preserve your culture and your stories and heritage. Maybe here's how you can leverage technology to do that. So they become the own stewards of their knowledge and information and aren't sort of, passing on to someone else to put into a database.
It's almost like the National Academies needs to create opportunities for tribal elders and for non-traditional experts into your system. The system needs to make it open for eldership and knowledge holders. Not only elders, but knowledge holders, right? Not everybody needs to be an elder to be a knowledge holder. What would that look like for an academy and all those things to do that? What about the universities? I've been trying to, University College Boulder, where I sit, I have a project with the National Park Service, and I think that's on a chopping block, I heard today. We were trying to create, what they call them, fellows. Fellows who sit we have a group called Series, Cultural Institute of Burial Sciences, and we were trying to create these fellows where these knowledge holders would sit and work with me on the pilot to advise and to support this curriculum to do travel climate adaptation planning. So I think, and so I tried to get the university to recognize these unique people who hold this knowledge and to create places in the academy where they can sit and be respected and have a place of decision-making and have opportunity for other researchers and such to interact with them to help build and to create an IP so that they're recognized as well, right? Their knowledge protected and recognized, and they can be credited for research, for publications, and even there's a big push, right, for to go commercial. There to be a recognition if they contribute to something, then they also could benefit financially. So I think that's another thing. I think, and when I think about decision making, I think about anything that's developed needs to be co-developed. It just does if it's targeting indigenous people, for instance. I think co-development's a buzzword, I know that, but for me, I think in like this table, right?
Mhm.
Creating this table where those also can sit around and with the people so they can come up with the kind of tools and development that would be most useful to tribal
Yeah.
communities.
And can I ask a clarifying question? This is definitely out of ignorance, but I need to ask it. Is there a clash in culture in terms of technology and nature and being one with the planet?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to this environmental justice issue, and it goes back to racism. And I think it goes back to sort of the economic system too. I'm working, I think Academy should be part of this. I'm working on a summit this year in San Francisco. And we're looking at new financial regimes to finance conservation, biodiversity and wilderness. And so we're trying to understand the current system, the weaknesses for this kind of idea, the strengths, but also what else can we do to do it? And we're going to hold it in Silicon Valley. And I think it'll be maybe the first of its kind like that, where it's really led by, we call it indigenous led. So we're building an advisory group that's indigenous led.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm indigenous, I'm part of the leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're putting that together. And I think there is a clash, right? There's a clash in values, I think a clash in time perspective, in culture, values and ethics and principles.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I mean, we have a challenge to kind of figure out, well, where are we going to do that?
Yeah.
And so we've been working with a term called ethical space. So ethical space is this tool of engagement that allows each entity to honor and respect each knowledge system and to find a place in that third system, that third space where they can interact respectfully and each system does not need to corroborate each other. So that's really important, right? Because we come into a system where Western science is up here, and then traditional knowledge is down here. So ethical space proposes to try to bring those things to a better place in terms of understanding, recognition, and respect.
Yeah.
And from there, then we have a chance maybe to understand each other better. And we all say bring forward what's most important to be understood in a way that can be understood by the other. But we still have this gap in understanding.
Yeah.
Just like you asked the question of what, the academy should be a leader in understanding this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would think so. And to populate the leadership and all those things, right? You can be a recognized body who understands these cultural things.
Yeah. And part of the context of the question too is, the availability of data, oral tradition, capturing those. But if part of the root cause of the issue is the clash in culture without this ethical space built in yet, any of those conversations, it's going to be getting further and behind in terms of making the traditional knowledge be available to reduce any of the stressors that we talked about this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that I don't think like technology necessarily is the end. I would say that, when you think about it, using a stone to grind up, food, for example.
Yeah.
Right? That's technology. But I think what it is that the technology that's developed nowadays is not in line with like a conservative status or like it's not developed in a way that's sustainable. And so, I think back to my high school economics classes, brought up that, some companies will actually produce products that are only last for a year or two intentionally so that consumers come back and buy more of it.
Yeah.
And, whereas I think, a lot of, and from my perspective at least, it seems that a lot of the technology is developed by sort of indigenous cultures is done so in a way that lasts forever. So for example, the lei that we make in Hawaii, there's forever lei, which are made from materials that we know will last forever. So you can like hang it up on a wall, you can put it somewhere. And then there are lei that don't last forever, like flower lei. But in that case, you hang it somewhere and you let it fly off into the ocean and, become, part of the land again. And so what I would say is I don't see technology as the enemy. I don't see that it hinders anything. I think maybe it can improve it in some ways. For example, I think it was so interesting because there's one hula melee performance performed at Mary Monarch, which is the world's premier hula competition. And I asked my uncle, I was like, where did this come from? How did they find it? And he pointed me to like this newspaper clipping, but it's in a museum somewhere and I can't access it and it's not publicly available.
Yeah.
And that's where technology comes in.
Mhm.
But then online, people can learn about it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Like I said, I think that it's how technology is developed that's the issue, not necessarily the technology itself.
Mhm.
Right.
And going back to your point, so integrating sort of that tribal knowledge and data
Yeah.
with the development of technology.
I'm gonna just real quick, we're at the 3-minute mark, so at 2:05, we're gonna break to the
Yeah.
other room, so just think anything you want to get in for this conversation.
Well, I think what's gonna happen, and I seen this recently, I was in Pacific Northwest and I heard this talk from from the Yakama Nation in the state of Washington, and Washington and Oregon are pretty progressive states.
Mhm.
It took 50 years to get there, but they're interesting to watch them. The state and the tribes interact on things like the environment, water,
Mhm.
fish, and all those things are really important to tribes. One thing they didn't like was renewable energy. The tribes did not like these big giant wind turbines. And to your point, how long do those things last?
Yeah.
And what do you do with them when they're done, right? Do you bury them and all that, all the minerals and stuff?
Mhm.
And, so the tribes know that, right? So each time those iterations will come, and then also wind, the offshore wind too.
Mhm.
Tribes are really against that.
Yeah.
And yet you have an agenda there from other companies wanting to push offshore wind on tribes and say, okay, because of your status, we don't give them you. So there is a clash.
Mhm.
I agree, it's not a perfect thing. But I think the decisions that come from that
Yeah.
are better when they're together, when we're at the table together.
Yeah.
And there's a recognition of sovereignty, recognition of self-determination. When policy aligns with strengthening those tribal views and tribal views on the land and water and the environment. When there's to your point about a system or a process that's more equitable to tribal nations and recognizing of sovereigns, that's where I think you're gonna see the change. I think
Mhm.
that's where you're gonna see really the integration of science and traditional knowledge,
Yeah.
especially with fish, right? And the dams, right? The dam's another example. When they tore down those dams, the fish improved, right?
Mhm.
Because at least that's what the science said at this point. But again, it took 50 years for those tribes to take down that one dam. But it happened. It
Yeah.
happened in my lifetime. And I listened to those elders talk about
Yeah.
the importance of that, right? So I do think that to me, the best tool they could come out with, this decision-making process come out is you gotta do that in co-development or co-stewardship.
Yeah. Good
It's gotta
development,
be
good
based on
stewardship. Yeah.
equity, and it's gotta be strengthened by some kind of a policy in place now, or probably needs to be developed that would recognize again, tribal sovereignty and self-determination.
And then who should be around that table?
Oh, man, that's a good question. 574 federally recognized tribes in America.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably intertribal groups like National Congress of American Indians.
Mm-hmm.
They've been around since 1944. Intertribal groups are important.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna say something for tribal college universities,
Yeah.
because I'm a product of tribal college, there's 35 of them in America.
Yeah.
I think obviously you need tribal nations to be part of that,
Yeah.
and then you need elders, and those knowledge holders, and spiritual leaders, and then the youth. From the tribe side, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And would there be no particular issue in bringing all those people together?
Well, I mean, I think, sure, there's complexity in this, but what I'm seeing today, right now, I've seen tribes rally, are building coalitions
Mm-hmm.
to respond to all these executive orders
Yeah.
and these attempts to freeze federal funding.
Yeah.
In which it seems like when the fire gets hot,
Yeah.
tribes will rise to that, and we know how to do that.
Yeah.
That's what I think is what's different today than before, is that we have the skills,
Mm-hmm.
wherewithal, even I would say even funding from allies to help us come up
Yeah.
that table,
Yeah.
knock on those congressmen and women doors.
Yeah.
To
I
make
heard there's
our-
like a group right now in DC who's like literally right now that's doing that.
I also argue that you all see the way to bring them to the table that's impactful, just because their time is, precious and meaningful and valuable, and you want to be sure that the discussions that they contribute to actually yield something.
Yeah.
So,
And then lightning round, is there a difference between urban and rural tribal numbers? On how you would approach this kind of,
That's a good question. I mean, it depends on how you define urban, because
yeah,
there's generations of urban natives that grew up in a Denver metro area, generations. And so this is what they know, right? This there. And then you also have on the reservation, like where I came from. But say, I've been able to navigate both worlds in my life. And there's a lot of people like me who grew up on a reservation, still connected to the reservation,
yeah,
but live beyond the reservation. And I think, I don't see it as different. I mean, I think it, sure, you know, if you're not here, if you're not there, you're here. But I think through speed of communication now, you can stay in contact with your relatives. You can always go back.
mhm,
You know, transportation now allows us to do that now, seemingly. So to me, I think it's a good question. I never really thought of it that way. But to me, in our Lakota worldview is that we treat each other as relatives. That's what the word Lakota means. It means to be a
Mhm.
relative. And so we treat each other, we don't look at it as rural, urban, at least I don't, urban and rural, we just treat ourselves as Lakota relatives, and even our other tribal members. And we don't make a distinction between urban, at least I don't.
yeah,
In philosophy, and a lot of people that I know feel the same way I do, because how do you disown your family
yeah,
Yeah.
culturally?
exactly.
Before we break, I would just, Koya, do you have a tribal affiliation with anyone particular?
no,
No?
I'm not indigenous North America,
Okay.
but my family, we have about 100 years of generational ties to the Viking, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, cool, just curious. All right, I'm gonna walk you guys over, thank you so much. I'm gonna
All
walk
right.
you over to Jared, he's gonna be the next question,
Yeah.
and then one more after that.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Getting close to the finish line, eh?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
guys are all going away now. Getting here.
15.
Good. Want to go reserve your website URL right now? Yeah. Very silly. No, you're so silly. Do you know where we're going? I have no clue. Following you, like, you know where. Is this where we're going?
Yeah, here, welcome.
Indigenous ways of knowing.
There you go.
Oh, Katie, turn.
Oh,
we
the
really
NASA staff left you guys?
No, I think,
No, Katie is one of your,
Yes.
yeah, participants.
So that means maybe that we are not in the right room, right? Do you know who you're supposed to be getting next?
yeah,
I don't.
Okay.
They're supposed to be like someone with whoever, and they're bringing them
Slow
here.
in our someone. Is somewhere.
Yeah,
Well, I'm gonna say we come here, right? Because it makes no sense to go somewhere else and then to come right back up here.
Just make sure it's.
Oh, we're not here next? All right.
I did think you did an amazing.
I think I'll see you next time. Yeah, in the third session. Yeah, there was a group that came in here. They seemed lost.
Oh, yeah, they were supposed to go downstairs. That's all right. Okay.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Please have a seat wherever you like.
Yeah. First off, my name is Chris Levine. I'm from LA County Distro, and flew from Los Angeles yesterday. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm John Ben. Probably have all heard from you over email. I'm program officer with the National Academies.
from the Navajo Nation, and I'm a fourth year PhD candidate on campus in medical genetics.
Oh, that's great.
Greater Denver.
Oh.
You must know that LA is the largest Native American.
Yeah, I was telling Jared that I've been trying to organize something like this over there. It's been 10 years. Yeah. Yeah. Way back when. Yeah. But some of them don't want to see each other. Yeah. Some of them don't want to see each other eye to eye. So yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Jared Arcanger. I'm the Standing Officer Tribe in South Dakota.
Okay.
I'm staff here at Cayenne as well, also an MPH student.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Quick question, Lucille, do you have a tribal affiliation? I didn't hear if you did. Pawnee?
Pawnee.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe you've heard this from the others, just in case, we have this question, this one is particularly about opportunities to improve decision making. And that's an open kind of like ended question, but in the context of cumulative impacts, right? And we defined that very early today, in incorporating tribal knowledge and data. So there's no right or wrong answer in terms of that question. And I just wanted to maybe start off by saying that, this morning was very educational for me. I know a little bit about, the tribal nation communities, but there's this maybe two contexts. One is urban versus reservation, response to this kind of question. And the other one is in terms of a lot of the traditions are oral traditions. And maybe I'll just leave it at that a lot of these are oral traditions. And, what we're trying to get at in here is where do we even start? If it's oral tradition, where is it recorded? How do we even capture those? So I'll start off with those, and then maybe we can feed off each other's answers. So.
Say at the outset that the opportunity to do tribal acknowledgement statements is a start. But tribal knowledge is individual to tribal nations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the attempt to organize it tends to water it down. So be very careful about data is a whole other area.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado has some inroads. There's at least one person here, Rachel Brian Knocker, with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And they've got 2 Native people who work in the data area.
Yeah.
And have made some effort to look at how tribal data is better accomplished now here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're in touch with national person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We certainly applaud, they're jumping into that. Because data has not always been trained.
On that last point, Lucille, data has not been, you said data has not been a friend of Native people. I mean, what does that mean?
We're always included under other. Hardly ever specific to who we are. I think there are people here who know that area.
Okay.
Clearly.
Okay. Any other reactions, please?
I think I'm having some challenges with the question.
Mm-hmm.
Partly in thinking about tools and who is making the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And then in thinking about tribal knowledge and data. And I guess part of my thoughts around the tribal aspect is there are some groups that maybe not like federally recognized.
Yeah.
Or I guess who's referring to tribal.
Yeah.
But as someone who is like doing genetics research right now, something that comes to mind is indigenous data sovereignty and having power to control the narrative of the data and where it's stored and ownership aspects around that. Related to what Lucille was talking about and how data has been used, there's like the fair and care principles. So like care, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm more caught up on the last part is where I'm like familiar, but.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that's super relevant. I could tell a little bit more context.
Yeah.
I think that this was really geared at, so bringing it back to, this is a study for the Environmental Protection Agency so they can improve their methods of cumulative impact assessment. So improve their methods of evaluating the challenges that people face to their well-being, right? And so Chris might remember more, but the Community and Tribal Liaison Group, I think they were thinking about what role can tribal knowledge and data play in helping those assessments be more relevant to tribal communities.
Yes. How do we actually not only impart the information, but how do we bring in the information so that, the outcomes of those assessments, studies, work, tools, products are relevant to the lived experience of those communities. So that's kind of like the last part there of the statement is the outcome that we're thinking about, but it's not going to be like relevant if we don't understand the challenges that's posed by this question.
Yeah. It's a complicated one.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of layers.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So it's not only the science, but and it's really better understanding the communications part of it. It's a two-way street. So
Yeah, I think, establishing trust is very important in this, I think there, is a lot of mistrust taking place within these communities. I think because, that collective benefit part, making sure that, these interactions, are characterized with some reciprocity. I think a lot of these communities, they get so much data that they, are offering and they never like see the results ever. And so I think, making sure that we are able to, I guess, report the data back to these communities
Yeah.
is super important as well.
Mhm.
So I think just like at the foundation, just really establishing those relationships, trust, and making sure that, we approach these communities in ways that are respectful and that honor, protocols, boundaries they may have, stuff like that. So.
And then along those lines, what are the opportunities to establish trust?
Yeah, I think, as Native people, we, formal connections are something that, aren't really normalized within the communities.
Mhm.
Really, come together through community gatherings, for instance. And we, interact in ways with humor, for instance, just basic values like that. And so I think, reaching out with these communities and finding ways to interact with them and engage with them are super important because each community does have different, protocol that we follow.
Yeah.
But it's making sure that, you reach out at a personal level first before we can move forward in, a more formal connection kind of way is really important. So.
Is there a difference between a native living in an urban environment versus, living in the reservation? And how does that interaction, if there's a gap, how does that gap reduced?
I think the diversity of the tribal population in urban areas presents a unique challenge.
Mhm.
for any kind of research
Yeah.
that involves the certain tribal knowledge.
Mhm.
Because sort of pan-Indian.
Yeah.
Takes place in villages.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And also there's a bit of hesitation even today from tribal and urban communities about being researched.
Mhm.
Because granted today, particularly at the tribal level, there are many more institutional review boards
Mhm.
that are tribally established and even how recent that really became a thing. But before that, there weren't any. And tribes were really at risk. And researchers just could do what they wanted to do and
Yeah.
never report back.
Yeah.
And if any IRB was involved, it was through the Indian Health Service. And some tribes trusted him, and some of them didn't.
Mhm.
So it's really not a negative history in the country.
So I'm just trying to reconcile that last point, Lucille. Is this in terms of research, right? So Jaylee mentioned about the distrust, the outcomes are not necessarily communicated back, there are multiple gaps that in services and access to those services that need to be addressed, as part of the outcome. I mean, at the end of the day, people try to, I guess, not identify specific origins of where the information comes from, just to make it. And is that part of the problem, the dilution of that process? Simply because you're dealing with so many tribes, 74 federal recognized tribes, few hundred non-federal recognized. So we mentioned that American natives are classified as others. Is that part of the problem, and how could that be improved?
I mean, even the US Census.
Yeah.
It's all self.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on both sides of that question. And also through the years, certainly the early research that was done.
Yeah.
Involved no native people as research.
Yeah.
I mean, now we've got some.
Yeah.
We need more because you mentioned the trust issue.
Yeah.
That's, I would think, I'm not a researcher, but I would think that's critical.
Yes, agree. My PI is Navajo, and we do a lot of projects with the Navajo Nation.
Mm-hmm.
So in thinking about like tribal knowledge, also respecting the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because we have our own tribal IRB, and that goes through a lengthy process of people who are outside who are interested in doing research on the Navajo Nation. You have to talk to chapter houses, you have to talk to community members.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very lengthy process that I don't think
Yeah.
you may be familiar.
Yeah.
But yeah, respecting the sovereignty of the nations and peoples that you're looking
And that may be the key, this respecting the sovereignty, but at the same time, does that limit the access to the information and knowledge at the same time?
I think that's part of the goal.
Okay.
Like to limit in a way that makes sure that safety and privacy is respected and protected.
Okay.
Yeah, because for some of our projects, there is an effort to like make it fair and like accessible and all of that.
Yeah.
But it's not all of that data has to be shared. And I think that's a part of the indigenous data sovereignty is we have the right to choose who has access to the data.
Yeah.
And make sure that it's for a good purpose. So I think limiting is kind of an intentional goal.
Intentional, okay.
Like,
Because going back to you go ahead.
Yeah, just say we're like 1 or 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Some of the final thoughts before your last session.
Yeah, but going back to John Ben's statement earlier, I mean, this is a US EPA study, right? We have these tribal liaisons, and then now there's this potential conflicting. I'll use the word potential because I'm not sure if it is potential conflicting element in the process of, we don't really want to talk to those people because we're a sovereign nation. We want to have the privacy and respect, and we don't really trust where that data is coming from. So now there's this maybe introduced gap, unintentional introduced gap into the project or the program.
There's like gaps and maybe like partnerships that need to be formed to cross that gap. At least that's how I take it as being a researcher is like,
okay,
there may be limited access, but we're willing to talk about it and like bridge it. It just has to be someone who's trustworthy and has good intentions.
okay.
Who knows if they'll be in the future.
Yeah, well, there's no more USAID.
That's right.
Department of Education is on its way out,
All right, we're at that time. Do you anything else real quick that I don't want to cut anybody off? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Got one more round for you. I can take you just down the hall to see Jared Evenet. She's here at the center. He'll be leading the last one before we join back up in the auditorium for I think we're going to have a little break, a snack break, and then we'll do our report outs again.
All right, thanks so much.
Don't do that every day. Yeah, no, I'd love to go.
Are they still in meeting?
Yeah, might be an elder talking, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is complicated, man. I'm not sure.
It is.
Cause I'm hearing a lot of like conflicts.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if, I mean, it's the end of our info gathering, but like, I feel like it's interesting to try and think of how to make the relevancy to these issues to our study. You know, and I think that's gonna be a challenge, is how to bring this in, and there's some, I think. I don't know if maybe a little bit more context for people. I thought we did the slideshow in the beginning, which I thought was pretty thorough, but
Yeah.
all right, let me go grab one.
Yeah. Oh, the earlier group.
Here we are. Now it's on.
You're back. Finally.
Home stretch. Please
Home
have
stretch.
whatever you like.
Yeah, there you go.
Take your chair.
We're just falling in as we are.
What's up with this here? Yeah.
Move over there to make sure I get everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
So, yeah, so we're in the home stretch. Yeah, thanks for coming back. So my name is Chris. I'm with an organization, government organization called LA County Metro, Los Angeles County Metro. So I'm from Los Angeles. I'm a committee member. Okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Katie Brown Cardinal. I am a community member. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I'm originally from Durant, Oklahoma, and my family and I have been in Denver for the past 15 years.
Hi, I'm Sian Harjo. I'm Seminole, Choctaw and Creek, born and raised on the south side of Denver.
I'm Rachel Bryan Ocker. I'm a citizen of the Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. I grew up here in Denver. I'm the tribal liaison to the State Department of Public Health and Environment. Views expressed here on my own and not as my.
All right.
And what's your name one more time?
Rachel.
Rachel.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Kimberly Blackhorse, I'm in Amalgamation. I too am a state employee at CDPHE and disclaimer, opinions of I state here are my own and do not reflect my employer.
All right.
And your affiliation again?
Choctaw.
Choctaw.
Oklahoma. CHOCPAW.
So we have that question on the whiteboard, the opportunities to improve decision-making tools by incorporating tribal knowledge and data. So just maybe a couple of points of clarification. So the first one is that decision-making tools for cumulative impacts, and we've been talking about that all day. We're the committee is trying to find out, going back to the context of the question, what if and how can we incorporate tribal knowledge and information and data sets that are generated from the nations, from the community, into what we do as cumulative impacts assessments. So that's the first thing. And then as with the theme of some of the things I've heard today, and not to bias the conversation, but I just want to put that on the table. A lot of this information, a lot of the tribal knowledge is oral. Technology is not necessarily available. And there is a level of distrust for anyone who's coming into a nation, to a reservation, on the reservation part of that. And then maybe
Clarifying, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just like we distrust you when you come into our residence, or you distrust us when you come into our residence?
It's the distrust of the reservation on the people coming in. That's what I thought I was hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the final clarifying point is urban natives versus those who are in the reservation. So I just want to put those, not to bias or anything, but some of the things that I heard that might guide the conversation.
Yeah, around
that particular question.
Yeah.
I think opportunities that could improve decision-making tools is creating principles that are unique to every tribe. I think there could be standard principles overall that we could learn from, but having unique principles that are developed by tribes so that they can own their own data. They have access to their own data, they control their own data, and they possess their own data. I said, okay, in what Canada is doing right now. I think there should be data sharing agreements that reflect the principles from tribal governance at the state and at the federal level. There should be a seat at the table to develop the respect and the acknowledgement of tribal or indigenous data within that realm. And there should be communication between state, academic, tribal organization, tribal governments, to also include those that are living in the urban settings, especially when they go to healthcare facilities like urban Indian health organizations, or to have access and to recognize that public health authorities also extend to the tribes, but also include tribal epidemiology centers to assist and support. There should be funding at that level to provide data modernization initiatives for the tribe to catch up, to have access to these infrastructures that is able to benefit the tribes and tribal members wherever they may be in this world.
You said some really rich, beautiful things, and I hope somebody was recording.
Yeah,
we're
recording, just
We're
for,
also recording for the
That was-
purposes of,
just for
yeah.
note taking.
You're a human people.
No, yeah,
I think
definitely.
It's quite dry.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, so that was a joke.
that,
Yeah.
my bad. Building on what she said, I think that, I think a key component right here is, and maybe this came up in other groups when they were talking about reservation versus urban versus rural, or reservation versus off reservation. In that a lot of tribal knowledge and data and decision-making around tribal knowledge and data, with the way the system is set up right now, really is from a government to government relationship often, right? And so that's our US government, state government, or federal government to identify tribes who have established a treaty, promise, and obligational relationship with the federal United States government and the geopolitical force, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so what that means is that when we're deciding, oh, tribal nations and all this stuff and best practices, that oftentimes we are really narrowing the field of tribal people that we're really having an effect on when we're only focused on working in a government to governmental relationship to serve tribal populations. So knowing that the majority of Indian people, especially in the state of Colorado, live off reservation, it would be beautiful to have cities, especially large cities that have a large population, come up with some kind of a urban tribal government organization that is similar to a reservation-based, that is almost acting like an embassy of sorts, as if we were to be in a different country and providing services to Americans who are in France, right? And so if there was a governing body for Denver intertribal Indians, and maybe it's only one block where that's the land that's like considered safe and identified for tribal people, like an embassy in other countries, that would be a beautiful opportunity to figure out how to channel funding, decisions, and data to urban populations where they don't have the same connections that tribal reservations have. And that's something that has yet to happen for tribal people.
Yeah.
Because the support, the government likes to think that the responsibility of the support that they need to offer is really confined in the boundaries of a reservation.
Yeah.
Right. And so when they have tribal CCDF programs, Sina Harjo on Ames Street, she can't apply, but the Ute Mountain folks can apply. Right. And so when we're thinking about how do we change systems and opportunities for all the tribal people, we really have to figure out how we understand and navigate working with tribal folks who are off reservation.
That's an interesting,
It is, isn't it?
yeah, because interesting model because on one hand, and this is out of ignorance, there's efficiency in dealing with the Lakotas
There is.
or the Navajo
There is.
reservation.
Absolutely.
Or the Utes or whatever, right? But there is also a need, as you've articulated, in terms of bringing people who are members of those but don't live in those communities simply because for whatever reason they live here in Denver, here in this metropolitan area. And part of what we heard this morning is this whole idea of in an urban environment, just bringing all those people together is a challenge by itself.
Mhm. It's almost an inefficiency to work
Mhm.
in tribal, to work just with Lakotas, because if you're gonna try to affect health outcomes in the state of Colorado, and you're working in a government to government fashion with tribal people, it means the government and its systems are working with the Ute Mountain Ute or the
Mhm.
Southern Ute, right?
Mhm.
When we're thinking about numbers of populations of people, both of those reservations, if we were to add their populations up, it's gonna be 10,000 people. In the state of Colorado, we have almost 200,000 native people.
They're not part of a reservation, that are out of
That
reservation.
includes the 10,000 that are on the reservation,
Mhm.
but that other,
990,
yeah, 180, I mean, our number might be 196,000,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
If you were to look on the website,
sure.
the 160,000 of those natives were living off reservation. And so if you're only funneling money to health programs that work on the reservation, 80% of the Indians in the state aren't getting those health needed supports. So do you think that you're gonna make a difference on the numbers and the data you're collecting? Oh, because you're only offering the supports to 10%.
Yeah.
5% of the larger population. So how do you do, yes, we're gonna work with the two tribal governments the way the establishments have set the systems up now. And recognizing that through governmental widespread acts
Yeah.
for a long time have positioned tribal people to live elsewhere than reservations. How do we create systems that are supporting those folks as well? Because we have a federal responsibility to those folks, no matter where it is.
And would like to hear from others, but one subtle point in that one, I heard this morning about NGOs essentially filling in some of those gaps. And I did post, if you were in the lunch report out earlier, I did pose out this question that was not answered because we didn't have enough time, of like how the NGOs who are bringing these services and these funds and these resources to non-reservation communities, how do they actually talk with tribal leaders so that there's this cooperation or collaboration so that everybody's served, and not just reservation benefiting and NGOs serving Native communities and like trying to seek for help.
Well, and I would add the nuance that it's not necessarily the responsibility of the sitting tribal governments in the state to serve the urban Native population.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So much as Indigenous politics are a land-based
Yeah.
politics. Like I'm Alaska Native, I
Mhm.
grew up in Denver, and I respect that I'm also a visitor here. 'Cause I'm
Yeah.
not on my own.
Yeah.
So I deeply respect the sovereignty of the tribes for
Yeah.
whom this is their homeland.
Yeah.
And I do think they should be treated in a very special way that's outlined by them.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the federal trust responsibility extends to all of us, urban natives who are tribal members living in urban centers. Like they do have a responsibility towards services to us, even though we're not always living on our tribal lands. In large part because they actively relocated people off of their tribal lands into urban centers like Denver.
Yeah.
Trying to dissolve their responsibility, but I don't think they have effectively done that, even if they are needed.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And, again, as I said, we have the resources, we have these buildings, we have these agencies who are here, Denver as a capital city. We should be able to turn around and see every possibility of places, agencies that are here to help us as a resource. And, we talk about education and Indian education in the public school system and help for the elders. We had a charter school, the American Indian Academy of Denver, and it was, I believe, 6th through 8th grade. That, and it was its own building. It didn't use a DPS, school, and they did, culture immersion. They did a sister city program where the kids got to travel to Hawaii and the Hawaiian kids got to travel to Denver as a culture exchange. And, we've had all these great things. And so why? Of course, it comes down to money, but we need the saturation of the financial resources, and hopefully everything can be restarted as what everything was already set out to be. We have a native clinic that a lot of people utilize, but why isn't it a hospital?
Yeah.
That's to have the question, why? You have all these Denver urban natives for 2-3 generations that have been here. And you've got the need, and so the funds need to follow behind it.
So is it fair to say that, because it's government to government and urban natives are not necessarily benefiting from the resources that are funneled into the reservations and tribal leadership there, that and the responsibility is not with tribal nation, right?
Like we're expatriates.
Refugees. Going back to the question, what would the urban native want to see?
Everything that's in the reservation native would want to see.
Yeah, what would the urban natives want to see in terms of resources, in terms of not getting? I feel like there's a need, but it's not. If I'm Lakota, for example, it's not the Lakota tribal leadership. Taking care of it.
On information that is sent out. For instance, visibility in terms of increasing the, instead of saying Native American, Alaskan Native alone, also putting Native American, Alaskan Native in combination with other races, that Hispanic, non-Hispanic, opening that lens to a broader range, so that we're more visible on the structures that it may be, whoever presents the data. That it's there. But also having respect for the homelands of the type of homelands that we were on right now, even though what has happened in the history and how we're here now. But still respecting the tribal sovereignty within the states. I think it works from top down, respecting tribal governments as governments themselves, and making sure that they're at the table. To have these conversations and opening up the conversation to additional principles when we're talking about principles referring to data that can be a collective benefit of the authority to control, make sure that we have respect and we're operating ethically at the state level, at the federal level, and making sure that people are brought to the table. Tribes, the Americans that are living in urban areas.
So there are two levels of. Is it fair to say that you're describing two levels? One is, respect of sovereignty, and then so that all of the tribal nations could actually get in their fair share of resources, but at the same time, visibility in, say in surveys, in the census, more detailed. What's the word I'm looking for? Identification. Instead of just being self-described, like, are you Lakota? Are you Cherokee? Is that what you're?
I think what I'm speaking of is, levels for sure. At the level of recognizing Native American at the national level with standards. Data standards.
data standards and data principles that recognize the government relationships that each tribe has uniqueness to.
Yeah.
And making sure that those standards are met, but then also recognizing at the tribal level that there are data standards and data principles that need to be respected, and we all have that responsibility and an ethical responsibility to recognize the sovereignty of each tribe. Then when we bring in the urban natives,
Yeah.
those that are living, they too have responsibility. We all have a responsibility to recognize that there are urban natives and they should have access to that.
Yeah, I just want to, when we're at about 1 to 2 minute mark, so I know this was a fast one, so just wanted to open up for some, last remarks from
Yeah.
anybody that.
Sure. Mhm.
So I do want to emphasize that I think that there are definitely benefits to tribes and native people to having sort of more integrated systems and reflection of tribal knowledge and data in sort of larger systems.
Mhm.
But I also think there's benefit to those systems to incorporating the things that native people know. I mean,
Yeah.
tribes and native people have been stewards of the land that
Yeah.
we're all sitting on
Yeah.
for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And that stewardship is getting harder and more complicated, and maybe it's time to talk to the people who've been doing it for a long time.
Right.
And if that can inform the larger structures and systems that exist.
Yeah.
And there's like a million examples of that. I mean, you look at Indian child welfare,
Mhm. Okay.
that is a system that's set up for, to set standards for how Native children should be treated when there's
Yeah.
system involved. But it is also the gold standard for child welfare. It is actually good for all children when those standards are applied. So I think there's tons of examples just like that, where we start incorporating what tribes know and what tribal people know and what is good for those groups
Yeah.
into a larger system. It is beneficial to not even just tribes and tribal people.
Yeah, and that's kind of like at the heart of the question there,
Yeah.
and it did start, I know we're out of time, but it did start with a lot of it is oral tradition, a lot of it is, these factors that, data is not necessarily acquired the way that people like them to be acquired, or folks don't necessarily know what happens to the data, even if they give it to them. And so therefore the service or the outcome does not get imparted back, to the community.
Why it's useful to us.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels extractive.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And
Okay.
guys tell me that.
Okay, well, thank y'all so much.
All right.
I know it's been a long day. Did anyone not filled out this form? Senna, did you?
Yeah, you have my-
I got your, you changed your email, and Katie, I got yours.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm losing track. And then we'll collect it all at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Sorry. And I think since we're running a little behind with building Labyrinth, I think there's some snacks and coffee available, and we'll probably take those straight into the auditorium and get started on the report out, so you can have your snacks and coffee
Yeah.
while we do those, and then we'll have some closing remarks. And also wanted to remind you that Jared at the center is offering an optional guided tour. It's like 15 to 20 minutes or so, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the building before you take off.
Wow.
Thanks, everyone.
Great meeting today.
Yeah,
thank you.
great to meet y'all finally.
We,
Yeah,
we were looking forward to this for the longest time.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to organize